A pleasant morning to all. I welcome all to the fourth day of the national level FDP jointly organized by ELTAI and Sri Ramakrishna Engineering College, Coimbatore. We are about to start the first session of the day on reading extended piggybacking to be handled by Dr. K. Elango. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the speaker. Dr. K. Elango is currently the National Secretary of English Language Teachers Association of India, the oldest and the largest network of English language teachers in our country. He was a former professor and head of the Department of English at Anna University with about 4 decades of teaching experience. He is committed to indigenizing English language teaching at different levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary, thereby radically departing from the Western-driven theories and practices. Sir, I welcome you, sir. The session is yours, please.
Am I audible, Lena?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Can I go on now?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. Just give me a second. Okay. Good morning to every one of you. Thanks, Ms. Lena, for introducing me to the attendees. The title of my presentation, as you could see, is Reading to be Creative, Piggybacking. I'm trying to highlight a couple of things through this presentation. Number one, when we read a text, any text that we read, whether chosen by us or given to us by somebody else, we tend to read mechanically. But our mind, such an interesting thing, either consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously gets triggered, gets ignited, gets fired. It attempts to associate with things that are related to our lives. If only we can capture them, capture those images, capture the thoughts that pass on, we can become creative readers. Not merely creative readers, we would be ending up with creative writers. You might wonder whether it is a possibility. I would say it is just not a possibility, it is a certainty. How is it a certainty? That's what I'm going to demonstrate through this presentation. The second thing I would like to do is, to be creative, we don't have to be 100% creative. We don't have to be totally original. We don't have to start from scratch. We can base our creative work on somebody else's work, some existing work. You might wonder how that is possible. Won't we be accused of plagiarism at a time when we are talking about intellectual propriety, anti-plagiarism? Can we borrow from others without being accused of plagiarism? Again, I'm going to prove that it is a possibility and it is a certainty. The last 3 days, most of our resource persons, as well as most of the researchers, have highlighted 2 purposes of reading. One, they said we read for information. Secondly, we read for entertainment. But I'm going to add another dimension to it. We also read for creativity, for creative purposes. Reading would enable us to unleash the creative potential, the creative spark in us. This is not an original idea, but I just want to highlight this is something which is happening among us. But I want to particularly focus on this idea and then drive home that we are ignoring this particular aspect. We are deliberately letting out the creative spark in us. And then I think we need to let it flourish. These are the couple of things I would say that I'm going to focus on in today's presentation. Let's start with autobiography. I'm sure that some of you at least would be familiar with Sam Pitroda's autobiography, fairly well-known autobiography, Dreaming Big, My Journey to Connect India. Sam Pitroda was dubbed as the father of Indian telecom revolution. And you and I owe him a lot. You and I have a telephone in our hands. The internet data is So cheap. May not be very cheap, but still it is cheap compared to several other countries, mainly because of this particular person, Sam Pitroda. We all know that he was advisor to then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. In his autobiography, in his page number 22, he mentions, I read out the first two lines. He says, the major subjects I studied were physics, mathematics, and chemistry. Chemistry I wasn't fond of, but physics and mathematics I found captivating. When you are reading these two lines, I would like to ask you, are you merely reading these two lines? Aren't you thinking of the major subjects that you studied at the undergraduate level, postgraduate level? Aren't you thinking of the subject that you liked? Aren't you thinking of the subjects that you hated? Aren't you thinking of the teachers, those who taught those subjects? Okay, this is what I call a parallel text. When we are reading a text, we are creating a parallel text. And that parallel text is the creative text. And we need to be conscious of the fact that we need to capture it. If you can capture it, you can write your own autobiography. When you write your autobiography, I'm sure that you'll be able to recall this and put in it. Okay, so I want to make a point that when we are reading any text, we are not reading it mechanically. We are doing a parallel reading, consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And there is a need for us to capture that. Once we capture that, I'm sure that we'll be able to become a creative reader as well as a creative writer. Next is parables into poems. One of the parables that all of us are familiar in our country is Six Blind Men and the Elephant. Okay, the origin of this particular parable goes back to ancient India. One interesting thing about this particular parable is that it is known all over the world. It is known all over the world primarily because of the moral that it contains. The moral is, we have a tendency, we humans have a tendency to claim absolute truth based on our limited subjective experience, ignoring others' limited subjective experience, which may be equally true. We tend to value our own experiences and devalue others' experiences. Not merely devaluing others' experience, we also even decry others' experiences. Okay, so we need to value everybody else's experience. That's more important if you want to get the absolute truth. And a poet in the 19th century, an American poet, John Godfrey Sachs, got to know this problem. Mind you, this is not America's parable, this is India's parable. And he got to know it, and then he poeticized it. I'm reading out the first stanza to get to know how exactly follows the spirit of this particular parable. He doesn't say anything new about it. All that he narrates in this poem, conveys in this particular poem, is that the parable that you and I are familiar with. It goes, it was 6 men of Hindustan. Hindustan was all of us are familiar, was the another term that was used during the British Raj to refer to India. To learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them are blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once he began to bawl, meaning shout, "God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall." And then it goes on with the other 5 blind men. Okay, so you could see that, totally alien to Indian culture, Indian tradition. Okay, and an American poet was able to get to know this particular parable, and then he poeticized it. And then you and I virtually on a regular basis encounter a number of parables, number of myths, number of legends. So can we also poeticize? This is what I call it, the creative sparkiness, and then we need to tap it. Next is a short story. This is something which fascinates everybody, irrespective of the age. Everybody likes to read short story. Instead of reading a short story mechanically, can you play around with the short story? Can you manipulate the story? Can you change the story? Change the story in any way that you want to. For instance, you can change the beginning, you can change the middle, you can change the ending, you can change the character, you can change the climax, you can change the point of view, you can change the setting, you can change anything that you want to. Because of which your engagement with the story is heightened. You become a better learner by changing the story. This is one of the things that we need to try out with our students if you want to develop that creative potential. The story I'm going to look at or demonstrate to is The Selfish Giant. I chose this particular story because it's known to all of us. It's one of the much anthologized stories by Oscar Wilde. In case you have forgotten the story or not read the story, this is how the story goes. The selfish giant, after 7 years of stay in his friend's place, got back to his place. When he came there, he found large number of children playing in his garden. This infuriated him. He drew away the children and erected a fence around the garden. Seasons passed by. Many seasons passed by. He became very worried because spring wouldn't come to his garden at all. Then one fine day, when he woke up, he found children playing in the garden, trees fully blossomed, birds were chirping, and then he became really surprised. He ran out of his house and he went into the garden. He found a little boy attempting to climb a tree. So what this selfish giant did was he went there, took the boy gently and put him onto the tree. Thereon, it was a happy time for the selfish giant. He played with the children. When he became really old, he sat and watched the children playing, but all the time thinking about the little boy that he helped. And then one day, the little boy arrived, and then he was standing at the one corner of the garden. He ran there to see him out of excitement. And then the children found him dead, lying under the tree and fully covered with the white blossoms. This the story goes. Okay. I mean, this is what most of us in a classroom limit ourselves to. But can we do something about it? One other thing that we can do about is, I want to delete a character, for instance. There are only two characters in the story, Selfish Giant and the little boy. We get an impression when we go through the story, there are a number of children. In fact, there are children, but they don't play any kind of role. Even the little boy doesn't play much of a role. He plays a very minimal role. He appears only twice in the story. Once he appears and the giant helps him to get onto the tree. And the second time he takes him away to the Garden of Paradise. And if you delete this particular character, no harm is done to the story at all. The story still remains intact. In fact, the story can become more universal if you delete the little boy, because he symbolizes Jesus Christ. For instance, the selfish giant, when he ran to see him at the end of the story, he found marks of nails on his palms and on his feet, obviously symbolizing Jesus Christ. So if you remove him, the story becomes much more universal. You can also change the point of view. The story as it is in the third person point of view, authorial point of view. Instead, can we make the selfish giant himself to narrate the story, or one of the children in the story to narrate the story? The whole story will change itself. Likewise, you can do any kind of change that you want to. And this exercise becomes mentally, cognitively very rewarding. You also become creative. This kind of process, I would like to call it channel conversion. This is not my term, this is a term that is being used. What is it that you can do under channel conversion? You can do number of things. Some of the things are pointed out over here. You can take a short story and then transform that short story into a novel. Similarly, vice versa. You can take a novel, convert that into a short story. Take a one-act play, make it into a full-length play, a 5-act play. Take a 5-act play and convert it into a one-act play. Take a protagonist, convert him into an antagonist into a protagonist. Take a flat character, make a flat character into a round character into a flat character. Take a humorous event and then convert it into a serious event into a humorous event. And then you can make a short film. These days it has become so easy. With your mobile phone, you are able to take a film and upload it on any one of the social media, especially on YouTube. And from a story, you can also write, maybe dialogue for a film. You could do script writing for a film. You can do a number of things. Likewise, there are immense possibilities. Imagination is the limit. If you can play around like this, I'm sure that our classes would become much more interesting, and more than interest element being brought into the classroom, and our children would become creative, not merely limiting themselves to the text that is given to them. Right. Let's go on to look at some of the poems that we can make, some of the poems we can create, not write down. There are certain kinds of poems, very simple tasks, but they are pretty interesting. Let's go to look at a poem called Cutout Poetry. Okay, what is this Cutout Poetry? Cutout Poetry, all that you need is a text, a page. It can be more than one page, and you need a pair of scissors. And all that you need to do is go through the text that you have chosen, and then as and when you come across an interesting expression, it could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a line, or it could be some lines. Okay, part of the lines, you cut out all of them. And those words or phrases or the lines are very interesting to you. And after cutting them out of the text that you have chosen, place them in a different text. You could see that over here. Look at the way the cutout texts are placed. Okay, I'm reading out one example. You can read words together or you can read separately. You get different kind of meanings. I'm not getting into the semantics of it because it will vary from person to person. Very quickly, since it's a very simple poem, it says, quit work, make love your purpose. Okay, these two lines are okay. But to look at the other ways in which they are placed, anything, it's in the topsy-turvy order, heart, okay, imagine, dream, look at the way it's been placed, achieve, okay, you can place it the way you want to. Okay, the poet obviously have something to communicate, something to convey to the readers, and this is one other thing that you can do with the cutout poetry. Let's look at one more example of cutout poetry, and look at the cutout poetry, samples of cutout poetry. Look at the way in which the cutout phrases, lines are placed. Okay, this is an interesting poem. It's against a background, so it can be on a blank sheet of paper. It can be also against a background. You have a head, and it reads, cut his throat, throw his body onto the street. It's not a funeral. Okay, so likewise, it's a very simple act. Anybody can do it. Even children at the primary level also can do it. All that they need is a text and a pair of scissors. They cut and then place it on a different sheet of paper, but through which they need to communicate something to the readers. Do you think it's a new technique? This is certainly not a new technique. At the turn of the 20th century, immediately after the First World War, there was a literary movement called Dadaism. You know, people at that point of time, mainly the Europeans, they become frustrated with life, disillusioned with life. They began to reject reason, logic, aesthetics of literature. In the place of them, they began to celebrate illogicality and nonsense. This is the result of that. Once again, this format became very popular after the Second World War, again for the same kind of reasons. The other kind of poetry that I would like to talk about briefly is the cutout poetry. Okay, cutout poetry is also very similar to cut-up poetry. The only difference here is you don't cut anything out of the pages that you come across. And another difference is that you need to have only one page. Okay, take a page, any page that you like to, and then read through it. While you read through it, mark the words or phrases or lines or part of the lines that you like. Okay, you can look at different ways in which they are marked. Okay, you can mark it the way you want to. Let me share one of the poems. This poem reads, look at these things formed by the change of light, color. I'm not able to read the other one. They are real where they exist. Okay, they're trying to communicate something along these lines. And you can also design it. You can leave the things that you're marked as they are, and you can also connect them as they are. Some kind of design, visual appeal is, you could find it over here. And then we go on to look at another kind of poetry, which is called the blackout poetry. Okay, blackout poetry, all that you need is one single page, and then you need a marker. You need a black permanent marker. Take the text, take the marker, and start blackening the page. Start darkening the page. Start crossing out the entire page, but leave only the words, the phrases, or the lines that you want to leave behind. So when everything else becomes invisible, everything becomes dark, only these words stand out. Let's look at an example. It says, anyone can scribble out words. The clever part is knowing which words to leave. Okay, again, not looking at the semantics, but the poet, when he was blackening that particular page, he found these words meaningful to him. Okay, these words made some sense to him. Another interesting blackout poetry is, why do shadows fall but never leave? Okay, blackout poetry is considered to be a cure for, even the most prolific writers, successful writers, at times suffer from, they're not able to proceed. In which case, what they can do is, they can take other piece of writing and then start blackening it, start darkening it. And whatever they leave behind may trigger the cognition, and they begin to write something of their own. Okay, and this is also considered to be a treasure hunt. Okay, it's considered to be a treasure hunt because you are able to identify the hidden meanings, hidden messages in unlikely places. And you could also use it to expand your toolkit. Okay, this is a very simple toolkit. All that you need is, as we said earlier, you need a marker, you need a page, and then start darkening it. And then you can upload this on social media platforms. We have got so many social media platforms like Pinterest, Tumblr, even what else? Okay, such platforms, and then you can upload them, and they are willing to recognize you as a poet. And this kind of poem is also called eraser poetry and redact poetry. And this is not very different from Blackout Poetry. It's called a newspaper Blackout Poetry. The text that you use is the newspaper, not any text here, but only the newspaper text. In 1929, we remember the year because it was a very critical year for America. That was the year where when the stock market crashed. When the stock market crashed, the New York Times carried a story that was a lead story. One of the points, what he did was, this is what he did. Totally darkened the page. And he left behind only some other words. You could see the words over here, though not very visible. The words that he left behind reads, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. And if you're familiar with Emily Dickinson's poem, I'm sure that you would remember the line. She's got a poem, fairly well-known poem. He says, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. He changed the word death into debt. Okay, so by misquoting, he's able to communicate the kind of agony, the frustration that they are able to go through it. I think it was William Carlos Williams, again an American poet. He said, it may not be possible to find news in poems, but you can definitely find poems in the news. So even the newspaper, most of us have especially in our country, most of us have the habit of reading a newspaper. When you're really tired of reading or when you're fresh reading it, this is one of the activities that you can engage with. And the last kind of poetry that I would like to talk about is called found poetry. Some of you may be familiar with this. Found poetry is finding poetry. Okay, you find words, phrases, lines, parts of the lines, and then you sort of reorganize them. Look at the way these things are reorganized. Here the visual appeal is also very important, but words are also equally important. Let's take an example on this. Okay, and you have a page over here. This is from Homer. I don't know which Homer it is, and words are marked first. It says, we declare, it goes, some of the words are marked, not so very clear enough to read out. And then, he has drawn a tree. It's a dead tree, okay, a leafless tree. And then you also have the roots over here. And you look at the different kind of colors on the page. You have a green color, you've got a yellow color. Look at the shapes of this color. And through the visual mode, and they're trying to communicate something to us. In fact, the found poets say that poetry is everywhere, but it is hidden from the public view. And the found poets, quite interestingly, take words and phrases or the lines from all kinds of sources. They take from a laundry list, grocery list, from posters, from advertisements, from documents, even the official documents. Of course, they also take it from literary text. So they take it from all this. The justification that they give, when water bottles can be recycled into chairs, why not the original sources transformed into something different? Okay, that's the kind of justification that they give. I spoke about all these things because it is not widely known to many of our learners. I need to introduce them. This is something that they can do it with a little bit of effort. And then the question that we raised, if you do like this, won't they be accused of plagiarism? Definitely not. They are not plagiarists. You can accuse them of plagiarism if they take words, phrases, lines, sentences, and if they paraphrase them, if they summarize them, if take the idea and use them their own. No doubt they are taking the words, but look at the way they are organizing the words. Look at the kind of insight that they give. Look at the counter viewpoints, counter perception that they are trying to communicate. Okay, that's how you can't really accuse them of plagiarism. They don't hide the fact that they are taking from other sources. It's just a kind of open thing. But using the others' words, they're trying to communicate something totally different from the audience. That's an interesting aspect of it. And in fact, one of the so-called modern poets have said that all writing is a collage of words: read, heard, overheard. No writer begins with a blank page. Some writers experiment with, let's say, with the language. Some poets experiment with the form. There are some poets who simultaneously experiment with both of them. So experimentation is very important. So if you want to, trigger your creative spark in you, you need to engage in activities of this kind. Okay, besides this kind of offbeat poems, let me go on to look at one of the well-known poems, The Road Not Taken. I'm sure that all of us are familiar with this particular poem, much anthologized by Robert Frost. And Robert Frost, all of us know that one of the much honored American poet, 20th century poet. The greatest honor that he said he received was when John F. Kennedy became the president of America in 1961. He was asked to recite one of his poems. The poem that he wrote for the occasion was dedication. And what happened that particular day when it was inaugurated, January 20th, it was a sunny day, but it was a very windy day. So when he was 82-year-old and he was holding the poem in his hand, and because of the wind, it blew out of his hand. But he remained unruffled. And he started reciting one of the poems that he wrote 20 years before, The Gift Outright. And immediately after that, he received a thunderous applause from all kinds of Americans. The practice that began then, 1960s, this was the first televised presidential inauguration, and it continues today. And inviting a poet to read the poem also is the tradition that was started then, it continues today. A word about this poem, The Road Not Taken. Everybody agrees that it's a very simple poem, but the simplicity is deceptive. Okay, it is general. At the same time, it's very, very personal. And even though it's a personal, the meaning of it varies from time to time. Okay, should we stop reading this poem? Can we do something more than this? How is that we can employ our creative spark reading this poem? Can we tweet on it? Okay, all of us are familiar with the tweet. I don't have to say anything about it. Let's look at the tweet. One of the graduates, after getting the jobs, tweeted. I don't attach much meaning to it. This is self-created for the occasion. It reads, 2 offers from the multinationals, and I took the one nearby with less perks, and agonizing over where it would lead me to. Okay, because he's able to find some kind of relevance, some kind of meaning in the poem that he read. And the one advantage, there are several advantages with the tweets. When you tweet, you can take a lot of freedom with the language. Okay, the freedom with the language is that you don't have to be really concerned about the linguistic conventions. You can sacrifice grammar, you can sacrifice spelling, you can sacrifice punctuation. What is important is the idea, not even words. Words are important. Without words, you won't be able to communicate any idea. But when you run short of words, you can always go for emojis. You have an advantage, but the ideas are very important. So when you tweet, the idea becomes very important. And secondly, the length of a tweet. Until 2017, we know that it was only 140 characters. But after that, they doubled it to 280 characters. Even though the characters are increased, the ideal length of a tweet is considered to be 71 to 100 characters. And if your tweet is anywhere between this, it gets 83% of engagement. If it's more than 100 characters, it receives only 13% of the engagement. And yet more significant point is that tweet forces us to be concise. Brevity is the soul of wit. You know how people are swiping their mobile phones when they want to look at the tweets. Okay, they do it as much as they can and look at the finger that they're using when they're using the screens. And if you want the people to read your tweet has to be very short. It has to be eye-capturing. Otherwise, there are millions of tweets and nobody has time to read all the tweets. This is not a textbook to be read, reread, to be pondered over. Okay, people are, as far as possible, skipping many of things. And then yet another thing that you can do is, I would like to call it a tweeterature. The word tweeterature is, it's an amalgamation. It's called portmanteau. Okay, combination of two words, Twitter and literature, it becomes a tweeterature. If you look at the history of it very quickly, two university students, Chicago University students, first-year graduate students, what they did was they identified about 60 classics like Macbeth, King Lear, Emma, Jane Austen, War and Peace. So some of the important classics. He chose 60 of them, and then he reduced all those books into tweets. Each book was reduced into 20 tweets or less than 20 tweets. Okay, the reason that they gave was, they said, these days nobody reads the classics. Classics are bulky. So they wanted to give the classics in such a way that the intellect of the 20th century somehow engages with it. They said that was their purpose. Okay, but what they did was, something which is very, very ridiculous. They have reduced the bulky books into ridiculously small size of 2,800 characters. And the tone that they adapted to narrate the stories, which is very silly, which is very humorous. Okay, they said that their attempt was celebratory as well as mockery, but this is not something to be taken very serious. Let me give you an example. If you take Macbeth, for instance, Macbeth has about 17,121 words. That's what I looked up today, this morning on the website. Okay, Macbeth, the entire play is reduced to 2,800 characters. Imagine the kind of damage that they have done to it. You remember the lady Maxine after murdering Duncan, and the tweet says, "There's nothing on your hands. You've washed them 100 times already." Look at the kind of damage that they have done to such a poignant scene, such a tragic scene. And I suppose all of us remember the first scene of Macbeth, where three witches meet, and the first witch says, "Where shall we meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?" Okay, and where they discuss Macbeth. And here it goes. The tweet goes, "Holdak say, Macbeth is killed by no man of women born. Relieved? The Terminator is not invented yet." Okay, look at the kind of damage that they're doing it. Anyway, based on that, you can create a tweet of your own. And then the theme, for instance, basing on the theme, you can come up with a tweet something like this. Two lousy things happen, and I took the bloody glamorous one, and that is best of my life. So you can do tweet and then Instagram, which is something the students are fond of. What I'm trying to say here is that these are some of the things that the students do on their own. Even we do on our own. So can we go along with them? Instead of being prescriptive all the time, can we get prescribed by them? Can we become descriptive? Can we go along their way? Then we can bring them to our own way. Here is an interesting Instagram. All of us know is a kind of visual platform. We can upload photos and videos. And then the interesting thing is you can sort of edit them, you can manipulate them, you can make it more appealing, more interesting. Okay, if you go on a nature walk, trekking, for instance, if you've got an interesting photograph, if you want to relate it to this particular poem, you can have something similar to this. You see the road forking and the man walking on the road that he decided to take. So Instagram is another thing that you can try out. And the visualization of the poem. By visualization, I mean the visual images. It can be in the form of, let's say, images, diagrams, animations. It can be in any form. Okay, if you look at the first visualization, you find a man at the crossroads in a dilemma. He wonders which one to take. And here, I think this is an height of imagination. He takes the last 4 lines of the poem, which are somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. That has made all the difference. What has he done here? Yes, he kept the poem as it is, and he showed the divergence. Okay, I thought, it's very, very imaginative. Very simple, but at the same time, very imaginative, using the poem to show the kind of dilemma that goes on in one's mind. And then you've got another visual here. This is the road which is grassy and wanted way. Maybe this is the road which was trodden by many people. Like the entire poem can be visualized. There is one, at least couple of advantages using visualization. One is, the visual imagery communicates even the very abstract things. If you want to communicate abstract or the concrete things, you can go in for visual imagery. And especially when you want to concretize the abstract ideas, you can go for visualization. And visualization is not something new. And it was there right from the beginning of our history, human history. Cave paintings, for instance, began with that. When they wanted to communicate something to others, they went for the cave paintings. I think it takes the visual imagery takes origin from there. And the visual imagery is not so very simple as it appears to be. Visual imagery involves, it's a kind of process. It involves, exploration, analysis, synthesis, and representing it. Okay, so visualization is one of the things that you can try out with. And then here we are going to watch this video. It's a pretty interesting video. Runs only for 2 minutes. Here you find a young child, rendering the poem, and at the same time placing some of the important sketches or drawings at different places. Now, can I request Lino or Indu to play this? Turning off my mic.
The road not taken. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry, I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I marked the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads unto way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverge in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
I suppose you liked it. It's rendered by a school student, and with that kind of analysis, totally different kind of video. We come across different kind of videos. I found this very fascinating. And the other thing that you can do with a poem of this kind is, intertextual comparison. This is not something that even the literature students do. As they say, I keep quoting this: comparison is way to knowledge. You need to keep comparing with things. Without comparison, you won't be able to develop your knowledge. You can compare this poem with the other poems of the same poet, or you can compare this poem with the other poets, predecessor, successors, or you can compare this poem with our own contemporary writers to find out the similarities and dissimilarities. This is precisely what the critics do. If you want to become a critic, you are becoming a critic based on somebody else's work. And if you engage in such activity, I'm sure that you'll be able to become a critic of some merit. And all of us know, if you are familiar with Robert Frost's fascination for woods, and look at the road not taken. The first line goes, two roads diverged in a yellow wood. When he repeats the exact line in the last stanza, two roads diverged in a wood, he leaves out the word yellow. A lot of discussion about why he leaves out the yellow here. And some critics say that you wanted to, from personalization to universalization, he does so. And there could be a number of interpretations. The other poem that I parallelly placed is Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, again a well-known poem, and you could see the kind of, the expression woods repeated in many places. The last stanza, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep on miles to go before I sleep, miles to go. These four lines are found, people say that on Jarol Negru's table, such a motivating lines. So what are we saying? We have got just one poem. Robert Frost's work ended over there. And from then on, we have taken a number of things on ourselves. Look, we have tweeted, we have created a tweetature, we created an Instagram photograph, we had a video, a different kind of video, we had the intertextual comparison. There are so many possibilities. We need to go beyond the text. This is what we call it, go beyond the text. If you want to become creative, you need to go beyond the text. These are some of the possibilities that you can do with any poem. Most of the poems lend themselves to this kind of creative work. Then let's go on to look at orature to literature. This is another interesting area. I would say not much has been done. Some work has been done. The term orature is again portmanteau. It's a combination of two words. Oral plus literature becomes orature. Okay, orature is mostly, not mostly, orature is always in the form of a spoken or in the form of a singing. Okay, it's passed on from generation to generation through word of mouth. Orature is preserved. Now, much of it is transcribed, but it's mostly in the oral form. The orature is mostly to preserve the culture. Every culture has its own orature, and that culture is totally different from the culture of other tribals. And you could see here that orature can take a different kind of forms. It can take the form of epic. It can take the form of folk tale, fairy tale. It can take the form of myth, legend, folk drama. It can also take the form of fables, parables, saying, pun, historical recitation. Because you can draw everything from from a particular culture. Any culture, especially in our country, if you look at any tribal group, they've got all these things with them. I don't think there is any culture in our country or any part of the world without any of these things that have been mentioned over here. In our country, all of us know that there are at least about 104 million tribals. We call them Adivasis, STs. Okay, they are there everywhere, especially in the northeastern part of our country. Right from Jammu and Kashmir to Tamil Nadu, you find them, but mostly in a place like Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. These are the places where you could find them. Even in Andaman, Nicobar Islands, you find them, quite many of them. And there is a particular island called the North Sentinel. Okay, there is a particular tribe called Sentinelese, still inaccessible. With all the modern technology that we have been, satellite communication, all the communication that we are talking about, we are not able to establish any kind of contact. They shun outside contact with them. But you know what the ethnographers do? Ethnographers, whenever they wanted to study a particular group, a group's culture, they go and be with them, live with them, observe them, interact with them. Okay, they observe their food, their dress, their tradition, their rituals, okay, music, dance, everything of them, and then they write. This is the work of the ethnographers. So if you want to be a creative writer without your own sort of imagination, all that you need to do is go and spend time with them. Okay, as our country has so many, as I said, there are 104 million tribes in our country. If you can spend time with one of them, few of them, if you go and observe them, the places where they are, and you'll be able to come up with the literature of your own, which is a orature. Okay, it has a rich potential. You know, one interesting thing about orature is that orature brings, it's in a way unique. It brings the written format as well as the written mode as well as the spoken mode. That's the kind of mode that we are employing in social media today. And that's how it becomes interesting. Let's go on to look at autobiographies. Okay, autobiographies, is all of us know, all of us are familiar with that. You know, autobiography is a self-written account of one's life, one's own history. And you can look at some of the samples, well-known autobiographies here, right from Malala to Obama's Promised Land, which was just published a few months ago. It was published in November 2020. Right in the first month itself, he was able to sell 3.3 million copies. And Michelle Obama, becoming the one book that she wrote, sold about 13 million copies. I think Obama has become the richest president. He has overtaken even George Bush, mainly because of the selling of these books. Okay, the advantage with the autobiography is that autobiography provides a vast canvas. You could, the autobiography can write about likes, dislikes, success and failures, not only personal life, but life in general, life at the time he lived. Okay, at the local level, national level, regional level, international level, anything that is significant, he can put them into his autobiography. But mind you, autobiographies is not something written for the cathartic purposes. Autobiography is written for readers. Okay, readers will be finding it interesting only when there is some relevance, something resonates, written in an interesting style. Okay, you and I can write an autobiography, but there won't be any readers, unfortunately. And the people are interested in the people, those who succeed in their lives. They want to imitate the successful people. And that's the reason why autobiographies of this kind of become successful. And we are going to look at Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. Okay, Nelson Mandela's work ended with writing that particular autobiography. It was published in 1994. That's the year in which he became the president of South Africa. And the book has about 656 pages. And let's look at what other people have done it. Okay, it's not that the creative spark has not been exploited by people. There are a number of people who are exploiting it, but we are not paying much attention to it, and we are not bringing that into the academic curriculum. And Long Walk to Freedom, see what happens. You know, we have got the children's editions. We have got the abridged version. We have got a summary of it. You know, besides the commercial interest, no doubt, you know, the publishers are interested in making money out of a successful book. But besides the commercial interest, they are genuinely interested in reaching to as many people as possible, interested in reaching even children as well. Okay, this is one other thing that can be done. And book reviews. When a book is published, immediately after, it need not necessarily be done at the time of publication. It could be done anytime in your life in today's context. But, you know, mostly in the past, it used to be reviews are written at the time of publication. You know, you have got the newspapers, magazines, periodicals, websites these days, and you've got the bloggers who are reviewing them. Okay, Mandela's work ended with this book, but look how people are making use of it. If you think that you're a good reviewer, you're a critic, you can use that. And then the audiobook these days, you know, mention has been made by several resource persons. the last 3 days. Okay, you can make an audiobook. You can make it even an abridged audiobook of it. Okay, here is an artist. Okay, just this one single slide. Look at the amount of information that you bring. In case you don't have time to read that particular autobiography, and if you look at just the slide alone, it brings you plenty of information. You know, like his birth year, 1980, and death year, some of the important events in his life. In one single page, in one single slide, look at the amount of information that they can bring it to the readers. And here again, another sketch. This is an interesting one. It says, "Long walk to freedom from hate, the longer walk to freedom from love." And this also made into a film. Okay, any successful book, people are filmmakers are waiting to see whether they can make it into a film. You got a film over here. So as I was mentioning, the writer's job, Nelson Mandela's the autobiographer's job ended producing that particular book. After that, look at the number of things that people have done. Okay, same is the case with the biographies. You know, I don't know to say much about biographies, very much like autobiographies, but a biographer has an advantage of being with the celebrity, observing the celebrity, interacting with the celebrity, interacting with the family members, circle of professionals, circle of friends, the public, whatever the interesting information that he's able to get, he can put them into it. Whereas an autobiography does not have that kind of an advantage, but as a biographer enjoys these kind of advantages. This became popular even in the 18th century when Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, which was published in 1791, this genre became very popular. And then novels to graphic novels. Graphic novels follow the format of a comic strip. You have got the speech bubbles, and then you have got the framed illustrations. And in 1960, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee became very popular. The moment it hit the stand, it became a bestseller. It was also made into a film. It was also made into a graphic novel. You could see the sample of a graphic novel over here. Okay, you could see the illustration, the speech bubbles, and things like that. The only difference between the original work and the graphic novel is that in a graphic novel, you've got the illustration. In the originals, you've got pages filled with words. You know, sometimes it intimidates the readers, especially the struggling readers, the reluctant readers. More than struggling, I would say the reluctant readers. When the reluctant readers find some kind of pictures and some kind of short dialogue, it invites them to read. They become better readers. They're able to comprehend better. They're able to store these things better. That's an advantage of having a graphic novel. There are so many graphic novels, and we have classic stories. Again, as we said earlier, classic stories are not classic novels are not read these days. So one other thing that we could do is we can take a classic novel and retell it. Okay, even in the UK, I was told that Shakespeare is not a novelist but a dramatist. It plays her out of the school curriculums. So one of the ways in which you can get the children interested or anybody interested in this retelling the story. Okay, retelling the story to a greater extent follows the spirit of the story, but it makes it so very interesting and makes it so very relatable to the teachers as well as to the students. So you've got number of classic stories retold. And recently, this appeared last week's Times of India, Ramayana and Banana Leaf. There is an artist called Rajendran in Kerala, and he retold Ramayana on a banana leaf. Okay, quite an interesting attempt, and he is known for this kind of an artwork. And then classics abridged, more abridged, and then you also have the graded readers. Okay, graded readers are the simplified versions. This again is mostly for the beginners, for the young learners. Here, the lexis and the syntax, both of them are controlled. Okay, all the leading publishers, name any leading publisher, maybe Oxford, Cambridge, Macmillan, Pearson, Warren Longman, Warren Black Swan, whoever it may be, they all have the graded readers. Again, to cater to the beginners and arouse the interest of the students. Here, look at the way the level has been, the grade has been decided. If it's a first level, it has only 200 head words, and then keep on increasing the head words. And similarly, syntax, initially you will find only the simple sentences, but as we go along, you also find the complex sentences. This is another thing that we can do, reworking of graphics. Okay, I don't think that I'm going to deal with. Running short of time, I'm going to skip all this. I don't know where I'm going to end. Let me look at a place where I can end. Okay, maybe I can mention this. The bilinguals. We are living in a country. Maybe I'll end with this idea. We are living in a country where there are 22 languages which are listed in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. All of us know that. Besides this 22 languages, we also have another 99 languages which are there in the Part B of the Constitution. And besides all that, 2011 a census says that we have got about 19,500 spoken languages in our country. And 37% of our population is bilingual or multilingual. Okay, many countries globally may not have this kind of a facility, but our country has all this. So we need to use this as translation. Translation is a gold mine, and we need to. Our learners, most of the learners have 2 languages or 3 languages. Like there are some bilingual writers as well. When we think of bilingual writers, the writer that comes to our mind is Rabindranath Tagore. Gitanjali, for which he was given the Nobel Prize. He wrote it, all of us know, in Bengali. Bengali had 157 poems, and he translated at only 103 poems. And when he went to England to get the introduction from W.B. Yeats, the first day he lost the script, and then somehow he was lucky enough to get it. And W.B. Yeats wrote the introduction, very interesting introduction. Maybe that could be one of the reasons it was known to the Western world, and then getting a Nobel Prize for Rabindranath Tagore become easy. And then we've got Samuel Beckett. He's basically an Irish writer, but settled in France. And his masterpiece was, his magnum opus was Waiting for Godot, okay, which he first wrote in French, then translated into French. Joseph Conrad, very well-known writer. He wrote in Polish, French, and English himself. Vladimir Nabokov, we have got Russian, French, and English languages. And there are many such writers, Manoj Das, Kamala, umpteen number of writers. This is one area which was not really tapped fully. If you become creative in one language, it is possible for you to spread your creativity to other languages as well. Maybe I think this is the time of selfies, so I need to spend a second on this. I think we need to remain public that we are still alive. This is one of the articles that I wrote and got it published in the Hindu, they called the New Age English Teacher. I wrote just the article alone, but the designer over there, look at interesting design that he has got. He has got a palm, he has got iPhone, maybe iPad, and over which you got English, and around which we got the different domains of knowledge. The point I'm trying to make here is, if given a chance, I would disband the English department and send English teachers to all the departments, because when a content is taught, they're using a language. When they use English, they're in a way, they don't know how to go about using the language. We usually say whatever English teachers do, the subject teachers undo. So constantly we need to be with them. Learners learn language not only from English teachers, from all kinds of teachers. I mean, graphics is one of the areas, like we have got infographic. These days newspapers have plenty of infographics, cartoons. R.K. Lakshman, he is described as the god of cartoons, becoming so very important. We have got the lyrics, the singing, we have remakes, we have got collages, and then we have got film industry, how the film is making use of, how the plays are made use of, how the novels are made use of to make films. And all this, somebody writes a play, somebody writes a novel. Shakespeare, for instance, wrote only 37 plays. But, like about 1,500 films are made out of his plays. Same is the case with the novels. A single novel is made into a number of times. Okay, you've got all the blockbusters. The collective collection of Harry Potter was 7.76 billion USD. So a novel giving rise to arousing the creative potential, making livelihood for some other people. Memes became popular because of the social media. And this scene, nobody can forget. The moment you think of Titanic, there's the scene that comes to our mind. But look at what they've done here. And then writers also employ not only the verbal mode, they also employ a non-verbal mode. William Blake, as early as 18th century, when he wrote this poem, The Tiger, 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 Burning Bright, fairly well-known poem, he drew the sketches himself. And then we've got the visual literature. You have a poem over here. The poem, I'll read it quickly. The bullet that pierces his son's skull blows a hole through his dreams every night. Okay, you have a skull, the shape of a skull, and the bullet piercing through it. So visually, they are presenting that idea. Here you have got another poem. When you have a notebook, we start with the left-hand side and go on to the right-hand side. But here is a poet who uses both the sides simultaneously. He doesn't begin with the title. We normally begin with the title, but the title is somewhere here. Look at the way the poems have been arranged, wavy lines, and we have butter we have butter exclamatory marks, and we have got designs over here. We have got an interesting expression here, because without which you won't find the modern literature. And then 5 seasons in a teaspoon. I'm reminded of T.S. Eliot's J. Alfred Prufrock, where he says, I've measured out my life out of coffee spoons, and look at the visuals here. So what is it that I'm trying to communicate to you? Okay, all that I'm trying to say is that we can become creative piggybacking. We can write piggyback. We don't have to be totally original. There are umpteen number of works which are available to us. Okay, writers from the ancient times, and we can make use of them to become creative. We have got multiple genres. We have got multiple opportunities. Creativity also can be collaborative. Some of the novelists have written work collaboratively. Then we can use to mix the channels, verbal, non-verbal, music, images. We can be totally experimental. As I think Steve Jobs, who said, stay hungry, stay foolish. Okay, only when you stay foolish, only when you become weird, absurd, you can be experimental. If you're going to take the trodden path, okay, and you can never be experimental, you need certain amount of rebellion is required to become a creative person. So use your creative potential. It is there in all of us. It is there definitely in all our students. We need to ignite that. We need to ignite that creative potential. Everybody can become a creative. So let's not read any text that is given to us mechanically, and try and read it creatively. Try creativity while you are reading it, so that you can become a creative reader and a creative writer. With that, thanks.
Thank you, sir. So shall we move on to the Q&A session?
Yeah.
A question from Ms. Lakshmi. How do we
one second, ask them to ask me easy questions. Only when the question is easy, I would answer. If it's a difficult question, I would throw back the difficult question, because the person who asked the difficult question has definitely a perspective. So Lakshmi has to answer our question if it is very difficult. Go on, Leena.
Okay, sir. How do we motivate special education need students or intellectually challenged to read biopics or autobiographies?
How can I answer that question? I'm also intellectually challenged. Lakshmi, I can't answer that question, Lakshmi. Okay, I mean, you said they are the special children, they are intellectually challenged. What can you do with them? What can you do with a stone? Okay, even though there is a possibility of doing certain things with the majority of the learners, there are some learners with whom you can't do anything about it. The cliches, you can take the horse to the pond. Okay, introduce them. The whole point I'm trying to, the single point, the mono point that I'm trying to point out is that creativity in reading is something that we are ignoring it. If you bring in creativity, if the learners are capable enough, if they have the cognitive capability, they can become creative writers. They can end up as creative writers, Lakshmi.
Yes, thank you, sir. And so next question is from Mr. Vamshi Krishna. Can you suggest a strategy to increase participation in classroom discussion by students with learning disabilities?
Why is that everybody's talking about learning disability? I don't know why. Okay. These days, because of Corona, one of the things that we have been saying is an English classroom should not be confined to a classroom, the structure of the classroom. You need to take the students out in the open air, terrace, wherever there is an empty space. Put them in pairs, put them in triads, put them in small groups, give them a task. Okay, give them enough space to shout out even. Okay, that's one of the ways to experiment, because language is not learned only by listening. Language is learned by actively engaging it, and more than all that, using it. As the cliches, use it or lose it. Okay, our learners are not able to learn English primarily because we are not creating opportunities for learners to use the language. So I would say that every English class has to be a practical class. We need to stop teaching English, stop teaching language inside the classroom. Take them outside the classroom. Give them an open space. Give them activities. Call it task-based or activity-based, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so create opportunity for every learner, whether challenged, unchallenged, physically, mentally, intellectually, whatever the way they challenge. Create opportunities. When you create opportunity, they will be able to realize their own potential, and you can also, as a teacher, get to know the potentiality and improve on that as days go by.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And the final question from Mr. Sarath. How orature is different from folklore and folkloristic studies?
The folk tales are basically, as we all know, whether you call it folk literature, folk tale, remained only in the oral tradition. But what has happened in the last 1 century or so is that because of our over enthusiasm, because we want to record some of the tribes which are dying out, we wanted to record. So we started recording them. Okay, so folk tale is strictly not a folk tale; it has achieved the written form. That's how it differs. If you call it a folk tale or folk literature, it has to remain only in the oral form. As the epic Ramayana, all of us know is at least about 7,000 years old. Okay, it existed only in the oral tradition. Ramayana got written down only in the 4th century BC. So for so many centuries, I would say even millions of years, Ramayana, the epic, the great epic that we all venerate, remained only in the folk form. Okay, only in the oral tradition. So in a way, we are ruining the folk form by writing it down. Once you write it down, it gets the rigidity, it gets the fixity, the verbal versatility. The verbal changing nature. Okay, as we say, when it comes to communication, we can never cross the same river twice. Communication is something like that. Once you write it down, you are immortalizing it, you are doing a damage to the immortalization that you've done. It becomes rigid, it becomes fixed, you can't change it. But when it remains oral form, it varies from person to person. It varies from, even if it's the same person, okay, varies from time to time. So oral literature, genuinely interested, should remain as a oral literature, not as a orature. Orature is a damage that is done to the folk literature.
Thank you, sir. So that's the end of the session. So thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge on various creative techniques to extend reading and for deciphering different literary forms. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.